Welcome to The Core. I'm Dale Allen. You can connect with me in the Core community at www.thecore.space. Today I interview Arden Donahue. She's an energy healer that is trained in many different healing modalities and synthesized them into her own unique offering. We'll learn about what Arden does and then provide some really great takeaway tools so that you can begin your energy healing journey today. If you want to dive deeper, Arden and I are offering a very special Core Community online workshop. The details of that are below, and we would love to have you join us. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. That helps a lot. And now, Arden Donahue. I begin by asking Arden about her process.
First of all, it's about creating safe space so the person can relax. We're in fight or flight more than ever. So much of what I do is pattern interruption by creating a baseline relaxation in a safe place so that the person can let go. And then I can start to work with them energetically. And depending on what they're looking for, what they're coming in for, whether it's depression or physical pain or emotional pain, because usually people are struggling with something or they're stuck in something, or they're ill, or they're looking for a soul purpose and they're looking to connect more deeply with their own soul. It's just simply helping the client access higher states of consciousness because we are not our personality. We are not our programming. We are not our stories.
When I've worked with you, it's always been hands-on. You're just incredible with the way that you can move energy and get at underlying issues. And you're able to do this over the phone now, working remotely with people?
I am. In connecting with people on the phone or on Zoom, I am able to see them, talk to them, feel them, and work with them. I don't have to put my hands on them. So I wouldn't have actually done that if I didn't have to with COVID. So that's been kind of a silver lining. One of the things I've also become really clear about in the nature of energy, and I'm an energy healer, spiritual healer, is soul loss, which is another way of saying, energy loss or leakage. And all the ways people give their power away through believing their thoughts, believing their story, victim consciousness, blaming others. It's this constant leakage of energy. When we believe that the world outside dictates who we are, who we're not, how we feel, how we don't feel, I help to clarify that healing is an inside job and that we may not be responsible for our wounds, but we are responsible for healing them. In working with families and having the privilege to work with mom and dad and children and even grandparents sometimes, and kind of cleaning everybody off energetically so that they feel more autonomous, because family systems can be mucky. Everything is energy. Everyone and everything is connected. We're not created in a vacuum. We don't heal in a vacuum. We're created in the womb of our mother, who has influences from her father and her mother. And, it goes back in shamanism, 7 generations.
Yeah. So talk about not being aware of or conscious of what might be ailing us. You're able to access something that might have happened to someone 7 generations ago in our line, and it's currently disturbing our experience in this lifetime. Now that's valuable. Sometimes it takes another person. Sometimes it takes a healer to just get at something that we can't see ourselves. I think an example that you just gave of going back to something that might have happened a few generations ago that we're not even aware of, but you're able to kind of get under there, find it, bring it up for energetic release and clearing, and it allows us to live more freely and more empowered and more able to make decisions with clarity, not having some unconscious agenda playing out. What would be an example of, you were talking about cleaning everybody off in a family. So what perhaps have you seen in a family situation that was the root cause of a problem? You worked with each person individually. What are some of the things that, came to light that you then were able to free the family of?
Oh my goodness. So it's so important for mom and dad to be healthy and clear and autonomous yet connected, and understand that their children come through them, that they are their own sovereign beings, and that not to dump their unprocessed stuff onto their children, which is what most people do. So before we have children, it's such a great thing to do, first of all, is to know thyself, right? Understand how energy works. Understand your wounds, do work on your wounds. And I tell a lot of my younger clients who aren't married or with a partner, that when they do meet someone, one of the first things that they should ask them is, are you happy? What was your family life? What work have you done on your wounds? Right? Because we all bring our baggage with us. And one thing that's great about relationships is that it triggers all the stuff, right? But can you imagine if both partners do a lot of the work before they come together and before they have kids? What a world it would be.
What a great suggestion. So before, when you were first meeting somebody, go ahead and on a first encounter, perhaps, but at an appropriately fairly early time.
You want to know, have they done any work?
Right.
Have they looked inside? Have they questioned? Because it's all, it's Carl Jung said, right? Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will run our lives, but we'll call it fate.
Anybody that has done a lot of internal work, it's very easy to say, yes, I'm very interested. I've done a lot of work on myself and I'm proud of that. You kind of know early on enough whether or not the conversation can go in that direction. And I think you'd want to determine early on that you're with somebody who can go there with you. They've done the work. They've looked at stuff. Not that you need to get deep into each other's psychology, but you just want to know that they recognize that all of us have these, unconscious things that run through us. And are they on the journey with you? Right.
And another way to speak to that is becoming a vibrational match, because I meet young women that are like, I want to find my soulmate. I want to find my partner. And, it's like, well, okay, how much work have you done on your own stuff? And are you becoming a vibrational match to that which you say you want to attract? Because if you're like, I want a great guy. Well, are you a vibrational match to that? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes.
It's law of attraction.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good work. So working with people, if they are wanting to get into a relationship, working with them to create the right vibration to attract such a fine partner.
That would be ideal.
Right. And then also another great example that you stated here is working with couples before they have children, adopt children, before children come into their lives, to start looking at, well, who are we as parents, in order to set the template early on to be as conscious and awake as possible when their children come into their lives.
Oh, yes, indeed.
So a couple could come to you, and let me ask you this too. So say a couple comes to you and one person is very open to energy work and one person isn't. You're still able to work with them?
I am, but that's a really, really good question, because throughout the last 25 years of doing this type of work that's been evolving and evolving and evolving, what doesn't work is when someone's like, my husband has to come see you, or I'm sending my sister to you. Doesn't work. People have to want it. So that's a good question, because if a couple comes to me and one is not so open, I would have the conversation with them and I would still be able to work with them. And ideally, it's like going to therapy, right? Dragging someone to therapy doesn't usually work. Right. So yes, and it depends, I guess, how resistant they are.
Yes, and if both partners show up, so there's enough of a yes to say, well, let's find out what this is about, because we'd like to be as ready as we can to be parents. As long as they start this process with you, again, you're getting at things that are underneath the surface.
Yes.
So the beauty of it is, it's kind of, if they just show up and are willing, somehow the energy will move, the information will come through, and there will be an improvement in the readiness for parenthood.
Absolutely. Because one of the universal laws is, our word is our wand, or what we declare is so. So in a session, we often set intentions and make declarations. So if someone declares, I am ready, right? I'm willing, I'm ready, then so it is. So they may not have been fully ready before they got there, but once there's a conversation and a more conscious readiness, then, oh boy, the energy moves.
I know that you've worked with so many different kinds of people. There was a gentleman, I think his background was military, and he seemed to be very, very tough and stern on the outside. In a typical sort of a prejudgment, one might think that a strong military guy is not going to come to Arden for healing. But this man did. I remember you talking about a profound experience. Of course, I don't know who the man is, and I never will.
Right.
But just as an example of the kind of people that come to you.
Oh, gosh, the armoring. You know, we all have levels of armoring. We all have, you know, first and foremost, you always meet a client right where they are. And there's no judgment. There's no hierarchy. Nobody's better than anyone else. With men, especially men in the military, there can be this exterior armor of programming and ways of being in the world that I've experienced softening really rather quickly, which is beautiful because we need to be vulnerable to heal. Healing is vulnerable work, right?
Well, that's an excellent point, Arden. Yes, we need to be vulnerable in order to heal. And we need to feel safe to be vulnerable, which is why the first thing that you do is bring on deep relaxation and a sense of safety. I think many people walk around their entire lives without a sense of safety. You and I both have worked with groups, and we know that once that, or individuals as well, once a person comes into that space where they know that however it is that they're showing up, there is no judgment and there is only love. And some people, it's their first time ever just exposing who they are and how they feel. It's a muscle. If it's never used, it takes a while to even realize that there is such a muscle and a possibility to share from the deepest place within. And that as one progresses, either individually with you or with me, or in a group, that muscle gets stronger. And they realize I actually can speak from my truth. I actually can, you know, come from my place of my deepest feelings.
Yes.
I find too that once you're in that zone and the healer is working with you, they become a mirror of what's deeply inside. It allows us to see for ourselves what's there just because someone is witnessing it for us. It's being able to go that tissue layer deeper.
It is. And though it is a process and it's layered, one of the most fundamental things that I bring to the table is holding sacred space with the knowing that whatever they need is available to them and it is inside them, and that they are already whole and that they're going to do their process in their own timing. How they do it, it's not up to me. So whether it's slow or quick or a combination thereof, it's always layered, right? Because we don't just heal instantaneously everything, but we can shift major patterns and major programs and make deep inroads into self-love and understanding, which is such a big part of it. Is like, I matter, I'm worthy, I have innate wisdom, I have gifts inside me, I'm more than I know. So I already know they are more than they know. And I hold space for them to access it. So it's a lot about expanding the light. Expanding, it's clearing the old, clearing the ancestral debris, you know, clearing some of those old beliefs and programming that we talked about that's ancestral, or maybe even past life. Maybe you were one of your great-great-grandparents. And through resolving that, the illness, pain, discomfort, stuckness is resolved. With past life work, in my experience, it'll show up if it in fact is an unprocessed pain, trauma from a past life that has been carried through. And a lot of times children will carry it through. So children, before they've shut down their sight, shall we say, their spiritual sight, will remember. But we forget. But on the table sometimes, and I've had this happen through the years with a handful of clients where they will go into that lifetime and literally be in it. Their body will contort. They will be living it. And I will move them through that to a place where they can glean the lesson so that they can again resolve the conflict.
That's fascinating. You also, when you are working with people, you might get a vision or an image of a blockage somewhere in the body, and you will perceive it as some sort of an instrument, a knife, a blockage. You'll get a visual image of removing something from a person. You don't have to be with them physically.
Correct.
But give me an example of some
so
of those
it's an
images.
imprint. So say in a past life you were riding on a horse and somebody shot an arrow into your back, and that arrow killed you. And in that dying, in that lifetime, you were worried about your family, or you were worried about whatever, revenge, or you turned out while you were dying, you realized it was your brother that shot the arrow. Usually it's a traumatic, like, betrayal or situation. So in that moment of dying, you are in a state of, I can't believe this happened, or I'm going to get you back, or it's unable to be resolved. So it's carried over. And then in this lifetime, lo and behold, you have that same person as your brother or your father or your mother in this lifetime, and it gets triggered. So that's the only reason it would be valid, is because there's a conflict with some member of your family or your boss or your partner that nobody can understand where it comes from. And then lo and behold, it's a past life. And then we can resolve it by getting the lesson. Maybe
that was a great example. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
It gave me chills, actually.
Yeah.
And so you'll see a lot of things like that because you work with this myriad of healing pathways. And one of them might be getting a download or information about somebody's past life and how it's still playing out. Talk a little bit more about pattern interruption.
All right. So, our mind has thoughts all the time. And the problem is that we believe them, right? So we can have a thought of, I'm not good enough, or so-and-so doesn't like me, or whatever a thought is that makes us not feel good. Whatever we think over and over and over again, and it makes us feel lousy. Byron Katie, I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Katie. She's great work on this. It's actually called The Work, where she coaches one in asking them, who would you be without that thought, right? So someone has a thought that their family doesn't love them. Let's just make it up. My mother loves my sisters or my brothers more than she loves me. So like the work is, you ask, well, is that true? Is that true? And how do you know it to be true? Well, I know it's true. Well, how do you know it to be true? And then the question is, and this is very powerful work, who would you be without that thought? If the hand of God came down, took that negative thought out of you and you had zero access to it, never to be thought again, who would you be? Probably happier, right?
It's a great example, really.
It's a great example.
Walking around with that. We all walk around with repetitive thoughts, but that's a fine example of, I'm the one that's less loved. I'm the one that has less value. I'm the one that's, not seen. That's going to play out in a lot of ways in life. So to ask that question, that powerful question, who would I be without that thought? Well, that's very liberating, just the very idea. It must also be like, again, developing a muscle around that, because the pattern would be to return to that thought. But right. to constantly interrupt it by asking, well, who would I be without that thought? Right in this moment, I'll choose to say, wow, I'm really loved. I'm so loved.
Exactly.
And
you
how would that
the
change?
Positive.
Right.
Affirm the positive until somebody comes to your face and says, you know what? I don't like you. Stop wondering.
Right.
Believe
Stop wondering.
You are loved, right? And then affirm.
Yeah. And then even that, you could handle that better if somebody just came to you straight out and said, well, actually, no, I don't. Then you go, well, what do I want to do about that? And suddenly you're back to being empowered with choice, as opposed to living in the psychic drama of your own thoughts, and therefore holding yourself back from this great joyful expression because, well, I'm just not as loved.
Yes. Psychic drama is energy leakage. It's victim consciousness. It's blaming. It's the powers outside of self versus actually choosing positive thoughts, affirming positive thoughts, believing positive thoughts. That's the power we have. And we own our power. And that is self-mastery, when we stop believing the thoughts that make us feel terrible and start choosing the thoughts that make us feel better, and then practicing that. So that's one way we can interrupt our own patterns. But on the table, when I'm working with a client, I've kind of already identified some of the underlying patterns or the imprints by having the conversations with my clients. So when I'm working with them, I'm energetically clearing out from meridians. I use stones, I use sound, I use my voice, I use words to clear out that imprint in the matrix. If it came from the ancestral, it came from grandma, great grandpa, or mom or dad, it actually doesn't belong to us. That's easy. It's pretty easy to clear. And then we are positive with the person on the table, and I have them do that with mental imprinting with words, actually through tattooing the words on their body, right? So everything is energy. Symbols are what communicates with the subconscious mind. So when I have the person on the table begin to like tattoo or draw a word that's the opposite of what was making them feel lousy on their body, then they start to get a visceral feeling with it, a visual feeling with it, and we begin to interrupt that pattern and that imprint.
The more we talk about it, the more there's an understanding. So as you work with a client, somebody who's come to you for healing, and in that first dialogue, you're starting to notice what patterns are there because they're telling you about their lives or what seems to be the problem. So they're indicating to you what some of their thoughts are. Perhaps some of them are quite limiting, and that pattern can be interrupted. And this is work that we can also begin to do on our own. Note the thought, interrupt it, replace with a new one, get better and better at that muscle. Then, in terms of the layers, you as a healer with this access to so many different modalities and a great level of intuition yourself are able to see things that the client has not been able to see, something that could go back generationally. And you've also just said that sometimes that stuff is just easier to clear. You can see it, you can go at it, you can remove the arrow and what the arrow meant, or whatever it was that was going back through the matrix, as you're saying, of that person's life. And what they're carrying around based on this generational stuff that they brought in when they were born.
Yes, indeed.
Now that brings us around full circle to when you were talking with people who want to have children, to start to look at what is the template that they're coming into and what might need to be cleared.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, gosh, by clearing before conception, then that new soul that's coming in only has to deal with their own soul matrix, their own choices, right? I believe that souls choose to incarnate with the particular mother and father to complete or to gain access to something their soul needs to expand. Because I believe being incarnate, being in body, it has a purpose. And one of those purposes is to evolve consciousness, is to evolve the aspect of the fractal of light, the soul, the God particle, whatever you want to call it, that is within us, for our soul to evolve, to complete with the lessons we've set forth so that we expand. In my learning and teaching, it's really expanding into self-acceptance and self-love, which is the most powerful medicine on the planet.
Yes, and I would say too, whatever anybody's worldview is, we arrive in a life and we're living one. And the more conscious and awake that we can become in this lifetime, no matter what our worldview is, whether we believe we chose our parents or we didn't, whether we believe that there are past lives or there aren't, we are currently having a life, and to live it as freely and as empowered and as full of satisfaction as possible, and as free to create as we desire, that's the goal, no matter what the worldview is.
Agree. And in this time that we're in, Dale, as you know, with COVID, et cetera, this has been prophesied and spoken about in so many different ancient cultures and astrologically about being a shift a great awakening, the Aquarian age. It has many, many names. And my personal belief is an awakening more to the truth of who we are, not our personalities, but our true soul essence.
Give me another example or two of people that you've worked with and breakthroughs that you've had with people. And I know that you've also worked with people of all ages. And you mentioned that children, you've had,
Yes.
you've worked with children too.
With the children, it's oftentimes just cleaning off the extra layers of other people's projections. Kids are quick. Kids are so quick. And really, what I must say when I work with kids, it's more than I'm working with the parent.
That makes sense.
Yes, because there's some dynamic there and a projection of some sort. So in working with the parent and the child, and just really, I use the term cleaning them off, so that they can feel their own feelings instead of it being a projection of someone else's stuff. I want to share one more story, which is of a 73-year-old man that came to see me, who just felt, purposeless, as a lot of elderly can feel in our culture. He wasn't actually from the United States. He was from another country. A precious session with him, in that during the session, he connected with his long deceased father and his long deceased uncle. And it was extraordinarily emotional for him. But it's not that it was just emotional. When the session was over and his wife and daughter came into the room, he started to speak about his childhood and the meaning of life and how life is meaningful, and how he has felt sad and he has felt purposeless. But as he was talking and sharing all of his wisdom, and the wisdom was just pouring out of him. We sat for an additional 25 minutes in my office as he just started to talk and weep. And his wife wept and his daughter wept, because they weren't kind of seeing him for who he truly was.
They weren't.
No.
Right.
Until this moment where they were all kind of seeing each other again. That, gosh, we are so much more than we know.
Think about that. You have a man who's in his 70s, his wife and his daughter are there, and if they hadn't come to see you, no one in that family constellation, the wife and the daughter wouldn't have known the depth of this man. This man wouldn't have been able to connect with his ancestors as he experienced it with you, to connect with his deeper feelings. None of it would have happened.
Right.
We're back to the preciousness of the lives that we are living. And this is such an incredible opportunity, being alive. How awake do we want to be? You're really bringing people from out of a mundane, wooden kind of day-to-day existence into something more alive and filled with emotional connection and a sense of, you're getting to the core. You're getting to the core of it all. Yeah.
And that it comes from within. It goes back to, we're not responsible for our wounds, but we are responsible for healing them. But it's like getting inspired, carving out that space to get creative, carving out that space to feel your feelings, carving out that space to inquire, who am I? Mm-hmm. What is true here? What do I want? Mm-hmm. Instead of being unconscious and running on programming.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't,
exactly. And just going day to day without really being alive.
Yeah.
You have another example? Because I love your examples.
Precious love, who's having an issue, losing hair. It's got a name, and I believe it's called
alopecia.
Yeah. And, working with her story and self-acceptance and just watching her learn to love herself and value herself and practice self-love is changing her hair. And I love that. And also healing elements of shock in her past, because shock is another disruption in the system.
Yes. When I had broken my wrist last year, and it has healed absolutely beautifully, for which I'm very grateful. But I also remember it was maybe a week after the incident, or not too long afterwards, but you had come to my house as a loving sister of the heart. And one of the things you talked about was that with that kind of a trauma, it's almost that the spirit jumps out for a little bit and has to come back in fully.
Oh, Dale,
Right,
it's so true. And
Right.
it's so much a part of this work is, is soul loss. And that's it's a shamanistic term, and it really does nail it. And it also nails back to this time we're in, and the central nervous system stuff, and wholeness and self-acceptance. It's really about calling ourselves, all aspects of ourselves, back to ourselves.
So it can be that someone, or many of us, many people can be just not even fully in body, right? You might be able to help them actually retrieve parts of themselves, energetic aspects of themselves, where they just haven't felt safe to be in their body.
Absolutely. So
Right.
that speaks directly to what you said. When you have an accident or something, I fell off a horse really hard. And so I went to see a fellow healer. And it was really fabulous because like right away, he could see my energy body was completely over here because of the impact was so hard that he was able to move it back. And it was literally he said, "Did you feel that?" And I'm like, "I sure did." Right? Because everything's energy. And this is, again, quantum physics, and physics has proven this and shown this to be true, that we are energy. And law of attraction proves that what you focus on grows. So we are multidimensional, and we are more than we know. And when somebody has a sincere desire to know thyself and to become self-empowered and self-responsible and self-accepting, we become our own talisman. We become very powerful beings in the world when we're aligned with all of our aspects.
And everybody benefits. Everybody
benefits.
Ourselves personally, and everybody around us, and then people we'll never even meet because our energetic frequency is different and it's more helpful and positive on the earth. Indeed. So take a moment, take a deep breath in, and just see if there's somebody else that comes to mind as an example, because I'm loving these. It really helps.
Women looking for fertility, women looking to get pregnant. Recently, we cleared some past lives around when it didn't go well in the past, so that the body memory, the cellular memories, resisting it unconsciously because it didn't go well before. So we can clear that imprint and affirm the positive, then guess what happens? Yeah.
Great example.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we have covered a lot of good ground here. And I really think that the most important message is that we can go through our lives in a familiar pattern. And yeah, that's okay. We can get by that way or not. Or we can go deeper. And Arden, you help people to go deeper. You open up a space of safety for people to get into a vulnerable space that allows them to access parts of themselves that otherwise might just stay under the rug unseen, where most likely they're acting out, in ways that don't serve us. So the more that we know, the better off we are. Any final word that you want to give as a send-off?
My soul path and soul purpose is to help others awaken to their own innate beauty, divine wisdom, and to bring forth into the world their light, their gifts, and their uniqueness in this age of Aquarius, which is all about both sovereignty and individualism and uniqueness, but also about the collective, right? That we are all indeed in this together.
Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm.
Arden Donahue, thank you so very much. So much love.
Gail Allen, I love you very much.